Thanks, Cahirlock. And first of all, I just want to offer a huge, big, warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today and for being willing to share your experiences. I think, regrettably, PDS, CDNTs are failing children and families every day, and ultimately you shouldn't have to be here to share yours or your children's stories. And I'm really familiar with the incredible work of West Cork Down Syndrome Support and Down Syndrome Cork, and I have no doubt about the importance of Down Syndrome Carlow in your area as well. And I also know, as I think we all do as public representatives, that parents of children with disabilities are among the most exhausted and at the end of their tether people that we meet in our work. And you shouldn't have to come, I know it's not the same people every time, but time and time again, and tell committees about this. You know, it's just important to highlight that as well. So thank you for doing it. It shouldn't be that way. It's important to say at this committee and at the Disability Matters Committee as well, of which several of us are also a member of that committee, that each of your children and all the children that you represent have a right to proper healthcare. They've got a right to education and to be members of their community and to live full lives. And it's essential that that point is never overlooked because, yes, the children may need additional supports or considerations, but these aren't optional extras. They're not charitable interventions. They're entitlements for those children under international law. I have a few questions for West Cork Down Syndrome Support Group and for Down Syndrome Cork. So first of all, for West Cork Down Syndrome Support, the most standout and worrying aspect of your opening statement is what you've told us about services in West Cork and how they've gotten worse under progressing disability services. And this is something we know from the Disability Matters Committee. None of the Children's Disability Networks teams in the entire country are fully staffed. I made the point before that if we were fielding a team for the Irish rugby team and there wasn't enough players, we wouldn't say that that's a team, you know? It's just to put it in simple terms. And if it's okay, you know, that's the plan that was, you know, supposed to overhaul supports and healthcare for children. So if it's okay, would you mind elaborating on that exact point, if you can, with examples? It doesn't have to be from your own, it could be other families within West Cork Down Syndrome Support. But for the committee to understand the kind of true impact of that, because like other members have said, it's really impactful for the committee to actually know the on-the-ground impact of that for people. And then from your perspective, what needs to change? So you're the experts in what your children needs. What does the government and the HSE need to do differently? And because it's there's different groups here, I just wonder if West Cork Down Syndrome Support could elaborate in particular on the challenges in a rural area like West Cork. You spoke previously about the proximity to the city in terms of accessing speech and language therapy, and then, of course, how, you know, it's an hour and a half from where you're based and add an hour onto that if you're from the Mizzlin or Castletownbere. And Aileen, you also mentioned the fact that there is no special school in the entire Cork Southwest constituency. And then for Down Syndrome Cork, you very clearly articulated that speech and language therapy is the most important early intervention in the life of a person with Down syndrome and the utter failure of the state to provide that vital service. As you highlighted, 65% of respondents to the Down Syndrome Ireland survey have never received any speech and language therapy. And you, in contrast, have created a speech and language therapy service in which there are no waiting lists. So this service is only possible through the fundraising of parents. But if we could put that aside for a moment, I think the point that I'm trying to focus on is what are you doing differently that means you have no waiting lists while the HSE have disgracefully long waiting lists? And like we had the HSE into the Disability Matters Committee last week in relation to those waiting lists. And what they're always saying is like, it comes down to staffing and we're doing all of this recruitment, spending all of this money on recruitment. And at the end of the day, there's different ways that this could be treated in terms of how the HSE approach it. And it's very obvious to me that it's like, we're trying, we're ticking boxes all of the time. But of course, if they were really trying, if it was treated like more of an emergency, like we've seen during COVID or different times like that, when they want to move mountains for something, they can. And it's really annoying, say, when we have those conversations with the Disability Committee, when we're constantly just met with the staff. I'm wondering, for that reason, could you highlight how is it that Down Syndrome Cork can do it without a waiting list? I know it's a different scale and it's all of those things, but, you know, we all know that if they really wanted to, they could. But to hear from an organisation that is doing it through fundraising. I think that would be really helpful for us as a committee. And then on the funding issue, you have clearly a really successful model in that vein as well. And it's providing a really much needed service. I'm just wondering what's happened when you've approached the government and HSE to seek funding. They have to be able to see the kind of success of your service, and I'm just wondering what you get in relation to support. And then just a final point is on the issues of education and the transition from primary to secondary. Just, you know, we've spoken about this at length in the Disability Matters Committee as well, but it's kind of incredible that there isn't a kind of, oh, how many people are there in special classes, in special schools, in ASD classes, in primary, and let's kind of prepare for that, you know, in relation to secondary. It's kind of incredible, you know, that just really basic forward planning isn't being done. But I just wonder if the members of the committee could speak to that, because in any kind of report that we do, if we hear from witnesses, it helps us to kind of reiterate and re-highlight that point. And also in terms of home tuition, maybe from Down syndrome Cork or Carlo, is it the case that previously children with Down syndrome could access home tuition hours and now that they aren't able to? Thank you, Chair.
I believe there was a few questions there, particularly for West Cork. So if we want to start with Aileen and Barry and then Cara, and then there's a lot there as well that will be relevant, I think, to Carlo. So,
thanks, Holly. Going back to our little group, we're a small group of 17 families, and our children are aged between kind of 3 and 16. And a lot of our families have the same thing. They don't know who their team is. Those that shout the loudest get the services. Now, when you do get your services, they are of great quality and everything, but you only get blocks of them. And by the time you get back to thinking, oh, when did I last see those people, you're kind of nearly you've forgotten who they are. You know, there's no kind of follow-up and whatever. And then if you're in the school system, that kind of takes over. So it's very hard then, because you're so busy with them learning and everything. But there's no clear kind of provision made. Like, a lot of our kids haven't seen anyone since in the 3 years since lockdown. Lots of people haven't seen anyone at all. Maybe it might have been a full year. So they're not providing for, they have failed to provide a service for the children. And like, it isn't like the team aren't there. The team are there, but like, they're broken up into slots of days, and you ring up for an appointment, but you might get it in 3 weeks' time. You get a block, and that might suit. But our children need services all the time. Like that report about recommendation of weekly speech therapy for everyone with Down syndrome. You know, it's kind of, they're missing the beat a bit, that it's just our children are unique in a way, but they really progress with services on a regular basis. And unfortunately, in the last 3 years, a lot of our children have regressed, and, you know, you'll never again get back that ability, you know, to progress. I suppose, like, we're fortunate now that we do have private speech therapy through Down syndrome Cork in Skibbereen, so at least the kids don't have to travel. Like, can you imagine sitting in the car for an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, getting there for your 40-minute slot? Yeah. And then, you know, number one, it's exhausting for the parents. Plus, if you have other children, sure, they're missing out. You know, it's not just the child is missing out. I suppose Cork is large, and we are that much bit further west. I suppose we're different, you know, and we don't have access to extracurricular kind of things, you know, that maybe people in the cities do have, you know. So I think we're at a slightly more back foot, but we continue to try and progress anyway.
Cara or Barry? Barry, do you want to come in?
No, I'm okay.
So I think the question for me was in relation to SLT and how we have managed to ensure that we have no waiting lists. It has been really tough, if I'm honest, but we know how many members we have. We've got 400 members in Down syndrome Cork, and we know the age groups of the various members. So we've tailored our speech and language therapy programmes. So, for example, you'll get a block of 6 sessions for your child, and within that 6 sessions you have a specific programme that you will work on, and the speech therapist will share the notes of that with you. They're also willing to share it with the school, and they give you very proactive exercises that you can do with the child at home that falls into the goals of that block of 6 sessions. And then we spread that to as many children who need it as we can. But in addition, we do speech and language therapy camps. We mentioned the Field of Dreams earlier, which we're so lucky to have such a fantastic facility, and that has been in partnership with the Department of Agriculture, that we could build that site, but we use it for speech and language therapy camps at the weekends, where we can bring a group of children who are at the same level and the same age, who can benefit from a group session with speech and language therapy. We do summer camps, we do various different creative approaches, as opposed to just one-on-one speech therapy with all of the children in our membership. And it's worked very well. You're not going to get weekly speech therapy for the entire year, but you'll get your blocks of 6, and then you have your activities that you can work with while you wait for your next block. And it's been very successful. It's not free for parents. Parents do pay for it, but the fundraising that we do within Down Syndrome Cork pays for the therapists, who are amazing. We have incredible speech and language therapists who are specialised for children with Down syndrome, which is very beneficial, obviously, to our kids and our older groups as well. And you know, we try to use as much of that fundraising to subsidise the speech and language therapy sessions as well, so that it's not too expensive for parents.
Can I just add one thing? Like, our service provider has a huge problem with recruitment and retention of staff, because they're part of they're a Section 39 organisation, and they cannot compete with therapists coming out qualified and nearly being poached by the HSC. You know, they get their experience through these organisations, and then they just go on. Why wouldn't you? You get a different package, terms and conditions. You know, you might be doing the similar work, but the conditions are different. So, you know, until there's kind of a parity amongst people that work within disabilities as well, service providers like ours won't be able to compete. And then I suppose our, you know, disability sector is so regulated and governed. You know, a lot of their work is the paperwork. You know, like your child might be seen for 30 minutes, but that's an hour of their work, because they're preparing, then they're writing up reports and making sure that they've ticked all the boxes, crossed all the T's, you know. So the level of governance, which is fantastic for, you know, going forward and everything, but it takes from the working time.
I think that's a very important point, because while one of our challenges, obviously our speech and language therapy through Down Syndrome Cork, is dependent on fundraising, so we never know year to year how much money we'll have, and therefore it's very difficult to build a sustainable model. But in addition, if you do build this specialised group of speech and language therapists that we're so dependent on, in addition to depending on the fundraising, and then they leave to go to the HSE, it's very difficult to sustain it ongoing.
One final question as well is, I think it was quite powerful when you were speaking about the difference in services, Aileen, that you had previous to 2013, and obviously that's what most of the issues in terms of waiting lists and everything are coming down to, progressing disability services and the issues with the Children's Disability Network teams. And different professionals in the industry, different speech and language therapists, seem to have a different view in terms of, like, at this stage, does PDS just need to be scrapped, or are we so far in that we need to keep kind of pursuing with this and make it work? Do you feel like there's hope for working at this stage, or do you think it, like, going back to the previous model is the... I hear different things from different professionals in the field, and I don't hear much from families in terms of an opinion on that, and I'm just curious, not that I expect you to know, but I'm curious to know what you think.
Selfishly, we'd like to go back, you know. Yeah.
Lucy or Olivia, I'm conscious that you didn't come in on any of that. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Well, for me, Joey is 14 now, so if we scrap PDS and CDNT, he'll never be seen by anybody before he moves on into adult services. The model for the CDNT looks great on paper, but the rollout in Carlow has been an absolute disaster. We've got 9 clinicians employed by the CDNT in Carlow at the moment, but we've got 23 allocated posts.